Welcome back to the course Privacy and Security in Online Social Media. We are in week 9 and part 1. This is like very last 3 more weeks. So I hope you're enjoying the course. I hope you're getting whatever you wanted to get from this course, or you're learning things that are connected to other things that you do in your day-to-day life. What did we see in week 8, right? In week 8, we started off with what is privacy, what is the definition of privacy, what is Western states of privacy, taxonomy. Then we saw privacy indices. Then we specifically saw what is privacy in India, some studies around analyzing the perceptions of Indian citizens in the context of privacy, comparing it to the US. Can we actually get the 3 pragmatist, fundamentalist, and unconcerned categories in India? Similar questions were asked in these kind of studies. Then social media, privacy, online versus offline. We looked at some, in the earlier parts of the course, we also looked at privacy policies of different social media companies. Information disclosure, how much of PII is shared on social, how can it be used. Specifically looked at some examples from elections where you could actually derive who somebody voted for. Voter privacy leaks, that's the topic. User profile changes and linking, can we actually find out pk.profgiri and Punguru are same, and if they can be identified that they are same, can we actually tell them that, look, can you fix something so that your linkability score is, let's take something like this. We can say this is 100% linkable, this is 0% linkable. Right? Your score is 75%, 25%, and 50%. You can say that, look, 25% of the times only accounts can, both the accounts can be linked. Is this how you want to keep it? Sourcing PII, collecting voter ID card, Aadhaar number, all that we saw from government sources. Thread modeling, bread model, we saw an example of bank structure, how ATM machine, and what is the threat model, what is the dread model that you can look at, user feedback, re-identification of users, techniques to anonymize, k-anonymity, all that, the words we saw, privacy enhancing technology, STAR, VPN. All of these topics we saw in week 8, just to give you a sense of summary of what was week 8. Some of these topics are really, really large. So I would highly recommend you to take a look at it yourself as and when possible, and come back to us if you need any clarifications. That's week 8. So week 9, what we are going to focus in this part is to study users, right? One of the things, one of the topics earlier, if you remember, in one of the slides I mentioned, was silently eliminating the threat. Build tools so users can, and then train users, right? These are 3 different ways, meaning broadly 3 different ways that you can solve some of the security problems. So in this, if you have to build any technology, you need to know in what context you're building the technology, for whom you're building the technology. If you've taken a software engineering class, or if you understand how to build tools, how to build solutions, you know it better than me. One thing that we want to focus on is to actually the user side. Right? If you were to understand how users behave, are there any mechanisms today? Are there any frameworks to use? Are there any methodologies that one can try to study users? That's one focus that we'll have in this part. So privacy is complex. I'm sure by now you would have realized that it's very hard to define privacy. These are typical from the slides, but it's also very complex. By now you would have realized how privacy is so very connected to our day-to-day life in different forms. And if you were to only operationalize different ways that we think of privacy, it will be very, very complex. Right? It's also interdisciplinary. One of the things that this topic makes me particularly feel very excited about is that this topic is CS, policy, engineering, right? All of these topics comes together. So social science, so to say, user behavior, sometimes economics, because we are talking about how people read privacy policy. Is it even worth reading privacy policy? All of that, right? So it's a super interdisciplinary topic to study. But it's also very complex to study. For somebody saying that they know topics in privacy, their view, you have to really question their view. Which view do they have? Do they have an engineering view? Do they have a technology view? Right? It's so complicated in that sense. Some of the solutions, meaning I think these are broad structures. Again, if you look at ISO standards and security certification, if you were to go, maybe some of you can take that route, is that you can look at privacy certifications that are available that you can take. For example, an organization called International Association for Privacy Professionals, this is IAPP, provides certification for the topic of privacy. I mean, there are other certifications for security also. SANS is one of the organizations that does security certification. So you can take, I mean, the topics that we have covered in the class is a very smaller view of security and privacy, because we are focusing only on the social network part. If you take the broader part, there are certifications that are available. If you're interested, you will be able to take. If you take these certifications, one of the things that they would emphasize is the importance of solving the problem, security, privacy problem, through technology, process, and people. Build technology, make your process better, tell people what the problem is, tell people what the solutions are. Right? Process could be when a teller is in the bank is checking the account balance for our account, the account number that you just gave, or a check that you just deposited, he or she is able to look at the bank account, right? How long can they look at it? What can they look at all the transactions, or they need to know only the transaction that we are just now doing? If you ask them what is the balance, can they look at only the balance, or can they look at any other information about the account? All of this can be fixed by process. Technology is to build, let's take access control for this teller. People is, somebody comes and asks for, I actually wanted to know the account number of a balance of this account number. Should the teller tell the balance directly, or should they ask them, what is the, let's take year of birth of the account holder? Are you the account holder? Should they ask some questions and then only give the bank balance? Right? Same problem, solutions will cover technology, people, and process. Right? So some of the things that we have been talking until now, you can think of it as technology side, because that's what we are all trained on. We're computer scientists, computer science or engineering people, right? But we need to look at other sides of solving the problem also, process or people. So one of the ways to look at it is that, can you study actually the users? Can we look at the data? Data, I think we have been talking about quite quite a bit as part of this course. But can we start looking at users? Can we understand the users, understand how they behave, understand why they behave, and using that, can we actually produce technologies? Can we actually produce processes, right? So all these three are interlinked. So build a technology which can help process, which can better the process or better the people, understand the people, using that, build a better process and build a better technology. You can go in any direction. These are some famous quotes about what do users think. If you ask Henry Ford once said that if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horse. When he was building the car, I'm just probably portraying the context in which he must have said. When he was building the car, somebody would have asked him, oh, why are you building this car? Why are you wasting your time on this machine that can actually help replace horse? Then he made this comment, right? Saying that people would have just wanted only a faster horse. They don't really care about whether it's a machine. This one is another good quote by Steve Jobs. I love many of the other quotes of Steve Jobs. This is one which says, it's really hard to design products by focus groups. Right? Particularly, focus group is something that we are going to look at as part of this class. Also, this part also, a lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them. You want to make sure that you show people and then ask them for feedback, ask them for inputs on how to fix it. Many a times I tell students about this, that look, if you want to say what you're doing, if you want feedback from any of us, make sure that you build something, make sure that you have something concrete, and then ask for feedback instead of coming and asking for feedback without having any baseline created. Keeping the focus as users now, let's look at what all ways to actually collect data. These methods have been studied for many, many ages, and these are all very well established methods. Many studies have been done. I personally have done studies in almost all aspects of this. We'll walk you through what these methods are. I'll also show you some studies within the context of privacy, within the context of social media, where these methods are being used. And so you will appreciate the importance of this method. You will probably appreciate how these methods you can apply in whatever you're doing. Cognitive walkthrough, interview, survey, focus group discussion, lab study, field study, and real world study. I'm sure some of the words you're able to connect, but let's look at quickly what they are. Cognitive walkthrough. This is if you're building a solution and you want to build a better, let's take a device that can help give lectures. You as a designer will sit down and think that you are the end user of the product that you're going to build and walk through what all you will do, how all you'll do. You want probably a stylus. You want something that will help you to go back in the slides easily. You want something go forward in the slides very easily. Features that you want to build as part of the device itself. Right? So you'll walk through, assume that you are the user, how will you do things, a good way to start the design thinking. Not a comprehensive method, because there's a big bias here that you are building the tool and you yourself are behaving like a user. It may be the case that you're not the user for the tool that you're building. For example, you may be building a tool for 60 plus years old senior citizens. In that case, if you are a 25-year-old designer who's building, it's going to be hard to convince that you can think how a 60 plus year old person would think. interviews. Next to cognitive walkthrough, limited number of participants. In terms of methods, it is laid down in particular order. We'll actually question the order itself after a few slides. But limited number of participants. This is not a method where you will get like 100 plus users to interview, and narrow down the scope of options and direction. The useful outcome that will come out of interview methodology is to narrow down the question that you're studying. You want to build a method to identify phishing emails, talk to people about it, set up a questionnaire. You walk through a questionnaire, not necessarily in the same order. It's a conversation that you're having with people, understanding how they read privacy policies, how they actually make decisions when they are buying something online, particularly keeping the context in privacy. Do they do anything different if they're buying different products? Some sensitive product that they're buying versus some non-sensitive products that they're buying. All these questions you can generate, you can ask users and collect data and make your choices of which aspect of the problem that you want to study. Or even what are the next level set of questions that you would like to collect data from. Survey, which is a method that would be for collecting large amount of data. For example, in this, it's easy to look for 100 plus, 1,000 plus users. This is more a quantitative. The earlier one is more a qualitative method. This one is a quantitative method. And gather information that is not available otherwise, which is you can ask secondary level of information. Many times there are two ways to think about it: primary data that is collected, secondary data that is collected. Secondary data could be, oh, you're seeing this behavior. What do you think about if you were to behave in this scenario? What would you do? If you're walking in a mall, somebody's taking a picture of you in the mall, how would you behave? Will you hide? Will you put your mask? Will you show your face down? All of these questions can be thought about in a survey question. It's not their own behavior. Statistical representation of population of interest, larger number. So you want to make sure that you collect data for the sample, for the population that you are interested in studying. Same questions asked among every participant. One difference is that in interview, you may have certain set of questions, but not necessarily that you need to ask all questions to everybody. Depending on the responses, you can kind of change the questions and ask. Whereas in survey, you have the 17 questions. You're going to put the 17 questions in front of the participant and get answers to all the 17 questions, whatever they want to answer. Some of them may be mandatory, some of them may not be mandatory. So you make sure that you get responses from them. Online one, mandatory and non-mandatory, is easy to implement. While you're doing actually the survey, let's say signing in a mall and collecting data, you have to make sure that you get the data, whatever questions that they are ready to answer. Yeah, today this is done mostly online. Right? Hope that gives you a sense of what survey is, cognitive walkthrough is, and interview is. Next, focus group discussion. I said earlier, FGDs that we'll look at. Similar to interviews. So in interview, what happens is you're just one-to-one. This is you, and this is the user participant. In the focus group discussion, it's the same you, but instead of one, there are like 8 to 10 people. 8 to 10 participants. Right? Helps in narrowing down further in the arguments for the audience sitting. So if they in the interview, they could have had a view A, and then they could have had a view B. But if you get them together, they probably will discuss and converge on a view of A and B, whichever is appropriate. again, in focus group discussion, one of the important things to keep in mind as an administrator when you are doing the study is to get all the participants in the room to participate. Make sure that you go around the table and ask everybody what their input on for a question, and then let some conversation go between them. Of course, there is this in both the methods of interviews and this. If you get a person who's going to be more talkative, you're going to get more inputs compared to if you're going to get somebody like answering questions in like syllables, monosyllables. It's very hard to get participants open up for people who don't speak much. The next method is called lab study. In this, it is a lab that you set up, which has cameras, microphones, all these setup is there. Let's take you want to study somebody using a computer. You set up the computer in a table, and you get the user to come and sit next to the table and do whatever you want them to do. So you're actually recording the whole space with all these gadgets that are put in the room. There are usability labs that are set up, which have all these features in the lab. My guess is some of you may have seen it. If not, reach out to me if you're interested in seeing any of these labs. Depending on wherever physically you're located, we'll find out if you can actually get access to go take a look at a usability lab. But again, these are simple. I mean, simple in some sense, but it's also complicated in many sense, which is that it has to have all these soundproof rooms in case if you want that level. You want to have voice recorders, video cameras, eye tracking, for example. All of these devices may be needed inside the room. Record all movements, think aloud for participants. So this one. Last one, think aloud is when you're asking a user to do something, you're requesting the user to say that, please speak aloud as you think. Right? For example, in my case, if I have to say, how do I prepare for this lecture? I use this tool I use PowerPoint for preparing the slides. I come here, set up the audio system, set up the video system, and record. As I'm preparing the slides, I actually look for is the slides comprehensive? Is the slide able to explain whatever I wanted to convey, all that. So this whole, whatever you're thinking as you do the activity as part of the user study, you're asked to speak aloud so that the recording system records it. The administrator can take a look at it after the study is done. The last one, which is the hardest part of all the studies, is the real-world study. Real-world study in the wild, field trial. This is the most difficult because there's no control. In this one, there's a control, right? You can actually know what for example, there are even study rooms where you set up the double-sided mirror where you can actually see the participant, whatever they are doing, they cannot see, or sometimes it is set up in a way both ways can see. And now you basically have access to what the participant is doing. If needed somewhere, you can even control it. Right? The email that they're getting as part of the study, you want to tell them that as part of the study data collection itself, in the process of them doing something, you can tell them, nudge from them. You can ask them question when they are doing the study, all that. Whereas in the real world, that's not going to happen. It's a browser plugin that you built. You put it on the extension Play Store. They downloaded it. They are using it in the wild. They're using when they are on the train, when they are on at work. You can't really control what they're doing. You can't really give feedback what they're doing. So that's very difficult to set up, but it's the most powerful data if you were to actually show what users actually do in the real world. There is no control from the administrator or the person who's building the tool solution. So one question that I said earlier is that, okay, now that we know all these methods, right? We know these methods as cognitive walkthrough, interview, focus group discussion, lab study, real world study. We know all these methods. Now we know the methods. For any problem, which method do I use? Do I always end up using only real world for every study? Absolutely not. It's going to be terribly hard to actually set this study up. Should I just do cognitive walkthrough because it's the most easiest one? I sit in my room, I just do this. I will assume that I'm the user, write something up and then give it. That's also not a bad idea. That's also is a very, very bad idea. Right? So therefore, how do you decide which method to do? So some things to keep in mind while you're deciding on which method to use is time that you have, money or resources that you have, participants that you can get access to, questions that you can are asking, and the goals that you have actually set for the study. Right? Because if you don't have access to participants, let's take you're doing study for understanding students studying in a city X within the age group A to B and studying in a department C and something specific, taken a course on this topic. I mean, it becomes very, very hard to get these kind of participants, right? These narrowed down participants. I mean, this is at least slightly easier, I guess, if you think of health care studies, participants with disease X within the age group of A and B to collect data may be very hard. Questions that you're asking, right? Some of the questions are very natural when it comes to interviews, but when it comes to surveys, it has to be really, really clear, right? Really, really in terms of multiple choices, in terms of text boxes. All of that should be very clear in terms of when you set the questions up for interviews. Whereas in interview, when you set the questions for survey, whereas when you set the questions for interviews, it can be slightly open-ended. Again, I'm repeating, which is for the interviews, the questions can be open-ended. For the survey, the questions had to be really, really close-ended, but also all these options have to be clearly stated. Talking about questions itself, let's just talk a few slides about just probably very high level things that you need to keep in mind. But please remember the whole, I mentioned this once before, I think, but let me just do it again, experimental design. If any of you are interested in the aspect that we're seeing now, which is study, how to set up a study, what kind of questions to add, what methods to use for data collection. The broader courses are called as experimental design. Take a look at this course. Even this questionnaire design itself. I know I have a book which is called Developing Questions for Survey Methods or Survey Methods Questions. So the whole book, 400, 500 pages, is only talking about how to set up questions when you do a survey. So it can be that intense content, right? I'm just going to use like 4 or 5 slides to tell you some high-level things that you need to keep in mind while you're setting the study. And I will then talk about some of the studies that have used these methods to collect data and what kind of methods do they use. Our focus again is about the method that you can collect data for studying social media privacy and security problems. Closed questions, open-ended questions. How do you feel about taking this course? It's an open-ended. Whereas closed would be on a scale of 1 to 5, tell us how the course is. Keep vocabulary simple. Do not use a lot of jargons. We are very well known to use jargons. Keep the question short. Right? As much as possible, keep it short. What to avoid? Avoid double-barrel questions. Double-barrel questions are, these questions are, do you think the training material that was presented to you was engaging and effective? So essentially this is double-barreled, because if they say yes, are they saying for engaging or effective? Or if they say no, are they saying for one or the other or the both? It's not clear. Avoid this question, this type of questions. Avoid hypothetical questions. Would you use LaTeX for writing homeworks in other courses? Hypothetical questions are okay, but frequently using them may not help. Don't tax respondents' memory. I think this is something that many servers would do. How many hours have you spent reading research papers in the last month? Right? So how do I calculate 1 hour? Do I have to do 1 hour plus 1 plus 3 plus 4 plus 2 plus 7? And then I have to add it up and put it. So little bit of a difficulty in doing that. This is okay. Ours may be simpler, but there may be much harder questions that you can set it up. Avoid double negative questions. Students should not be allowed to speak in the class. Meaning, what does agree mean? What does disagree mean? It's not clear here completely. Avoid overlapping responses, 10 to 20, 20 to 40. It's not clear where I should put when I'm 20. Avoid leading questions. You wouldn't say that the training material was poorly designed, would you? This is already primed was poorly designed. It's pushing the user to think towards it's poorly designed. Be as clear as possible. What do you think about IIIT? What do you think about this course? Right? Instead, what recommendations would you have to improve your experience at taking this class? Keep demographics at last, because demographics, if you put it in first, users generally tend to think about if there are any questions that they don't like about you asking, their perception of the study, their behavior, their thought process while giving responses is slightly, so to say, disturbed, which can cause some concerns for the data that you collect. Ask some critical questions in multiple times. This is one of the important things that you should keep in mind. Ask the same question sometimes twice or thrice in the longer questionnaire to make sure that you're getting the same response. If you're not getting the same response, probably the user is not thinking clearly. For example, your last name or your year of birth, or something like that, which is very easy for them to pick. But if they're not really thinking, let's say if they're picking all the answers in the MCQ only as the first answer that is given, first option that is given, then you can actually figure out that it is not a proper data that you're collecting. It may be a machine also that is, so to say, filling your responses, I guess. So that's the part that I thought I will cover, which is to give you a sense of what are the different methods to collect data and some tips on questions. Again, it's like an ocean of things that you can think about, ocean of things that people make mistakes about these questions, data that is collected, all of that. I would recommend you to keep them in mind while making any of this. Go back and look for specific things that you are doing when you're doing it, so that you are aware you're not making the mistakes. Because when you collect the data, let's take you do a survey with 100 participants, you just missed asking a question, or you just collected the data slightly, it could have been collected in a better way, because the questions that you asked are not appropriate, not correct in some sense, then I think the efforts are wasted. So you can avoid that. Any questions until here, please post it in the discourse. Now let's continue looking at these methods, right? Now that I showed you some methods of data collection, let's look at what studies have been done to collect data in these methods. Very quickly, again, I'm going to focus only on the method, only on the questions, only on the data that was collected. In one or two places, I'm going to show you a graphs or something to show how the data can be represented, but that's not the goal of this deck. This deck is to show you that, look, we saw some methods. Here are the ways that these methods can be applied in studies, which have been actually done already. Right. So this one, interview study. This study is a study which is online social networks and police in India, understanding the perceptions, behavior challenges, right? So this one, the goals were to ask 20 police officers and 21 citizens about what they think of how social media is being used by police. And the reason why I'm connecting to police is, this is a topic that we already saw in the class also, right? How they are using online social media for their activities. Understand perceptions, explore challenges, because it's somebody, there's both sides of the problem, right? Which is citizens who are using the social media to talk to police, and police which is actually using the data to make some inferences. Interesting study, very, very intriguing in some sense. We got some very good insights about how both these parties actually use social media. The topics that were covered was the need for police to use social media, how social networks have been helpful for police so far, understand online social network usage policies followed by departments. If you remember some parts that I've covered saying that ex-police agency posted about, for example, Boston Police posted about a criminal suspect and asked details from the citizens. And can we share? Do we know how police organizations use? Can this information be shared across? Do they know about how police organizations actually use this platform? For example, Mumbai Police, I've shown you how they use it very, very effectively for having conversation with citizens. Challenges in adoption. Of course, all the platforms have challenges. Did they find any challenges while adopting to use the platform for either collecting data or pushing data? Again, the study link is here. If you just look up for the study title, you should be able to get it. So next one is a survey study. The first one is an interview study. Preventive versus reactive, how parental mediation influences teens' social media privacy behavior. This is a study where they said, okay, let's go look at how parental privacy concerns. As parents, we look at how children are using the social media. What kind of controls do I do? What kind of changes do I make in the parental controls? Is it the system? Is it the intervention that I'm talking to? That's the question they had. The goal was how parental privacy concerns for their teens and different parental mediation strategies influence teen privacy concerns, privacy risk-taking and risk-scoping privacy behaviors in social media. So it has all the things that we want, privacy, social media, and user behavior. Right? So that's the context in which I'm presenting this study. The goal that they had was to look at privacy concerns. What are the parental privacy concerns, teens' privacy concerns? They actually collected data from parents, and strategies are direct intervention, which is to set up some tools, set up some preferences on the systems. Active mediation is the way by which they were talking to their children, telling them if they need any inputs, any ways by which they can help, all that. So direct parental interventions through the use of parental controls and reading and setting up teens' social media privacy policy, helping them to set up the privacy preferences, all that. Active parental mediation is which includes talking with teens about what he or she posts, reviewing information of the teen's post, and or commenting on or responding to posts made by the teen on Facebook, right? So some kind of active mediation. I know actually parents who do many of this, which is to look at, first get connected to their kids on the social platforms, then have a look at what they're posting, probably give them some feedback about what they're posting. The teens' behavior are basic disclosure, what risk-taking behaviors are. They disclose that they're going for a party. They disclose that their date of birth is this, celebrating birthdays, risk interventions. They are sharing about risky things that they are doing. They may be sharing information about people that they are going with to a particular location. Risk coping behaviors are they are posting on social itself or seeking some help, and getting to know that the picture that they uploaded is probably something that they should not be posting. They delete the post. All of this is what risk coping behaviors of the children could be. Take a look at the paper if you're interested. That's a link to the paper. Here is what they concluded, which is they asked this, given that it's an interview study, survey study, they asked 588 parents to fill the survey. For the direct intervention and the active intervention, the options were low, which is each of the questions were asked for low, high, where the parents were asked to fill a question with the direct intervention and active mediation, which is what we saw on the last slide, which is direct is understanding the privacy setting that they have. Active is just looking at the post, giving them feedback. Do they do high of active interventions? Do they do high of direct interventions, right? So that's the response that 588 parents filled. So here it shows that the low, which is I have very low mediation with my kid. I have very low intervention with my kid. That's about 38%. The high is about 27%, which is I'm actively telling them to fix the privacy policy. I'm actively seeing the post that they're doing and giving them feedback about it. Right? So this is where I said, just to present the data is what I'm sharing this graph. Right? So now we saw interview, now we saw survey. We're going to look at focus group discussion. Focus group discussion is a interesting method, not a very common method that's used in computer science research. In this case, it is done to study the privacy perceptions in India, 20 semi-structured interviews, 4 focus group discussions, and 31 participants in total. Right, so we are more interested in this part. 4 focus group discussion, 31 participants. So if you remember, I said, right, 1 administrator and X number of participants for the study. Like this, 4 was done, and the total number of XYZA was 31. That's what this 31 participants in total mean. And the study was about generally asking them about different aspects of privacy, credit card privacy, mobile phones, internet, government privacy, financial privacy, asking them about social media privacy. All of them were there in the study, right? But this was at the level of a focus group. And same study was also was followed up by an interview study. Interviews is what here 20 semi-structured interviews were done, and also was also had the survey also after this, which is it at 10,000 plus participant filling the study. Even though this slide is placed in the focus group discussion, the point I'm getting across is that one study can have multiple methods that can be done. Interviews, focus group discussion, and surveys. The study had all three. And the study had social media that we were looking at also. This is how focus group discussions are done. Participants and administrator, topics covered, social media privacy, privacy settings, privacy policy, all of that we are interested in studying as part of this class. Lab study, right? So we are in the same path, lab study, path in terms of different methods that we are looking at for data collection. Lab study, I agree on the terms and conditions. How do users read policies online? A high tracking experiment. This is super interesting study, which is, if I were to tell you, ask you about which part of the privacy policy do you study, you may give me some answers in the survey, but I'm actually getting you in the lab. Remember the lab that I told you earlier, recording everything. Get person in the lab, ask them to go through the privacy policy, and the way that they are looking at the privacy policy itself, you collect the data and use that data to make the choices of how they are reading the policy. So this one is about privacy policy. The interesting thing that they did was they looked at like 100 of these privacy policies of different kinds. They took the Alexa ranking websites. Alexa is this not the Amazon Alexa that you would know, but this Alexa of Alexa ranking, which gives you, let's take for now, top 100 websites that people are, for the last 1 month, which has been accessed. You can get the data about, let's take in India, what are the top 10 websites that people are going to. So they took the top 100 websites that around the world or in the US that people are accessing, read all the privacy policies, took all the privacy components of a privacy policy, created a privacy policy, and showed it to the users. Modified it in a way that they can actually ask questions of the content that is in the privacy policy. Interesting model. So they reviewed 100 privacy policies, created a common looking policy. They created 2 groups. One group was, before clicking, I've read the privacy policy. They made sure that the policy is actually explicitly stated and the checkbox is actually after the policy. The other group was the checkbox with no default privacy policy. Policy was not shown, and they have the way to checkbox saying that, click the checkbox saying I've read the privacy policy. And then they kept the eye tracking tool to see how much they have actually read the privacy policy. They asked post-study questions about, did you read this part of the policy? Do you know how they are going to actually share the data? Do you know whether the study researchers who have access to this data, will they share? Do you know who all have access to this data? All of this was a question that they asked the participants after the study. Did the participants understand the study, understand the policy? Significant differences between groups because so the policy was written in Hebrew, so therefore it was read from right to left. And if you see the transparent part, is the part that more people have read. The darker the policy is, nobody has read that part because it's an eye tracking, right? You're able to actually know where they're actually seeing. I know whether any of you have played around with an eye tracking tool. Interesting tool again to figure out details about which part of the website I'm looking at. Again, take a look at eye tracking tool. There are some very interesting studies to see how people, which part of the Wikipedia page, when presented, which part of the Wikipedia page do they actually look at, and things like that. So this one is for privacy policy. So more people read this part in the default group, which is the part that, which is the group that was given the privacy policy before they actually accepted it. This one, less people read it because this is not a set of people who are actually forced to read the privacy policy almost, or default kept there without saying that I read the privacy policy. Field trial. You may remember the study. We have actually covered the study in the past, but just to recollect the memory, this is on privacy nudges. If you remember, we had like 3 nudges. So the goal for the study is that which of the 3 nudges are effective. They built these nudges, showed it to the users in lab, got some inputs, fixed it, put the extension, Chrome extension in public, got people to use it and collected data. Now I assume you would have recollected the nudges, right? Profile, a picture nudge, timer nudge, and sentiment nudge. Right. And this is one slide that I had to show you how the users in the field study actually reacted to the study, which is they had access to which users changed their privacy settings, which user went and edited the post, which user canceled the post, and which users ended up editing the privacy settings. For example, this user seems to have edited the post and gone and fixed the privacy settings or changed the privacy settings. All right, so we saw this. That's all I had for this week. Please, again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the discourse. But what did we cover this part is to look at different methods of data collection, some examples of how these methods are used in the context that we are studying, and some usual mistakes and things that you want to keep in mind while you ask questions. Thanks for listening to the lecture.